Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Virtual Engagement, Motivating Participants and Providing Case Management in Tribal Communities. My name is Tanya Davis. I'm a program specialist with the Office of Family Assistance, Division of Tribal TANF Management, and I'll be the moderator for this session. We like to ask that people keep their microphones muted unless they're speaking, and we're going to hold all questions till after the speakers have gone, so if you could keep your microphones off until then, that would be great. This workshop is going to explore how Tribal TANF and new programs can consider expanding virtual services for participants to motivate them to pursue opportunities, especially those which may have been inaccessible to them previously. The speakers will discuss a variety of strategies used in the past year to create, well, now a year and a half, to create virtual education and training opportunities and virtual case management services for clients, including how these offerings were developed, challenges along the way, witness successes, and recommendations for programs considering offering similar resources. The session will conclude with a review of OFA's Coaching for Success and Learning modules, which program staff can use to provide virtual coaching and mentorship to participants. Our speakers today, we're very fortunate to have 3 speakers for this session. Each of them will cover a different topic of virtual engagement. On virtual case management, we have Lisa Martin, who is the Regional Manager of the California Tribal TANF Partnership. For virtual training, we have Cassie Williams, who is the Assistant Director, Employment and Training Services for the Choctaw Nation Summer Employment Program. And for virtual coaching, we have Deb Joff, who is the Associate Manager for PCG. All right, and now that we've got all their names out of the way, the first one up is Lisa Martin. So Lisa Martin, up you go.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's really good to be here. Let me make sure I can see my notes instead of my slides. As mentioned, my name is Lisa Martin, and I work for California Tribal TANF Partnership, otherwise known as CTTP. We're one of the larger tribal TANF organizations in California. We have a service area that ranges from the San Joaquin Delta and the Bay Area all the way to the Oregon border and east to the Nevada border. We serve both urban and rural areas, and we operate in 19 counties with 18 site offices and 1 central administrative office. So for an agency our size, we have 8 departments, an average of 90 to 100 employees, and we serve about 400 to 500 cases per month. It was a large endeavor to make the sudden shift to virtual service provision and to coordinate going remotely internally with all of our staff. So my goal in this presentation is just to provide a timeline of how we as an agency have adapted over the past year and a half, the best practices we've implemented, some lessons learned, and how we see value in those lessons moving forward. Next slide, please. So our initial stage was probably very similar to a lot of your agencies. In March 2020, we found ourselves facing that uncertainty of, do we close our offices? Do we keep them open? And luckily, we're very blessed as an agency to have an executive director and a tribal council that are very proactive. And the decision was made very quickly to close our offices to the public. And then later on, we moved the majority of our staff to remote work to limit that exposure. Because we have such a large staff, our first hurdle was how to get everyone up and running with technology. And we had limitations on how many workstations we could deploy. So that left us short-staffed for a few months. We had some offices that were normally 4 to 5 staff that we were left with 1 to 2 essential staff doing the same amount of work. So during this transition period, we had to relearn how to provide services without face-to-face interaction. And what we've always known, but it became apparent during this time, is that we were very antiquated in how we did our paperwork and processes. We still run on a check system. So once a month, our participants would come in, pick up their check, drop off their paperwork, or drop off their paperwork another time. And so we knew that was antiquated, but we liked it because it gave us an opportunity to see our participants at least once a month and engage with them. So obviously, when we moved to virtual service provision, that went out the window. We also had very little use of video conferencing. We used it internally because we're very large. There's 3 regions that our sites are broken up into in various different departments. So we used it internally, but we didn't use it with our participants. So making that shift to virtual was difficult for us. So we were on Skype originally. Skype wasn't working for us once we got more people on board. So we moved to Zoom. Instead of printing, signing, and scanning documents, we made a shift to PDF signatures and DocuSign. And then we also posted our application documents to our website, made them PDF fillable. Our main goal was trying to ensure service access during this transition, so we had a huge influx of intakes and families in need. Some were new, others had been on our program previously. Some had actually been off our program for a decade or more and were now returning in a state of crisis after being self-sufficient for an extended period. So our priority was just getting people access to services and ensuring a flow of funds to meet needs during this time. So we also had to consider how to balance eligibility and program integrity with the flexibility we needed to do different forms of document submission and applications. So we started accepting picture texts of documents, emails, online forms, and fillable docs with digital signatures. And we removed the face-to-face requirement for application, and we replaced it with phone and/or video interviews. We also had a lot of staff training and troubleshooting of technology, while simultaneously we had to assist our participants in acclimating to this adjustment. We had to establish lines of communication, a lot of soft skill development to get participants up and running on new routines. Things like how to take a clear picture, how to use PDF signature, how to sign up for an email. A lot of our participants didn't have emails. And so we saw our youth actually step up and assist their parents and caregivers during this time to learn how to use technology. And we really took this opportunity to learn along with our families. Next slide, please. So some of the challenges that became apparent for us early on were issues surrounding equity and access for our families. We all know there's always been a digital divide, and it runs along economic lines as well, but it was highlighted by the pandemic. And so this includes, lack of internet service, computer access, phone data for our families. And of course, it's exacerbated in rural areas where phone service, internet, and transportation were already challenges. Additionally, supporting the mental health and safety of our families took precedent. So we had children who were suddenly isolated, parents who were overwhelmed becoming teachers. We knew that our participants struggling with substance use and domestic violence were in unsafe situations because of the isolation. And so that became a priority for us to engage with them and check on them more frequently. So we literally had to meet participants where they were at because there was no ability for them to come to us. So for a lot of our staff and families, there was no quarantine. There was no downtime. It was a really precarious time with a lot of stress and high needs. We were also dealing with that loss of connection, not seeing them monthly. A lot of participants were too stressed to focus and connect virtually. So our caseworkers took the time to check in with our families daily, sometimes more via phone, text, and email, sometimes all three. And for those that we knew had mental health, substance use, or domestic violence concerns, these check-ins were incredibly helpful when we spoke to staff. And it was almost easier to ask those difficult questions because this was a time when everyone was struggling. So a lot of our staff reported a greater connection with these different mediums of contacting participants. We also lost participants, unfortunately, due to COVID. We had whole families impacted, multi-generations, and this impacted our staff tremendously. So our staff's mental health was a big concern at this time. And everyone in our organization stepped up with resources. Information sharing increased. Our IT department supported with technology, HR supported with medical and employee assistance information, and our supervisors really provided support to their staff who were on the front lines. Additionally, service navigation became important because we suddenly had to become experts in pandemic nutrition assistance and unemployment and children's education. So we had to rely on our community partners more than ever and increase that communication throughout this time. As an agency, we saw this time as an opportunity to review policy and procedures to be more responsive and reflective of needs. So we did policy review and we fast-tracked several changes that would provide immediate benefits. So we raised our earned income disregard. We disregarded other types of income, such as stimulus and pandemic assistance during a time when our participants needed this the most. We also looked at our supportive services, and some were once in a lifetime. One of our education and job supports, you could use them once and then that was it. And we knew that post-pandemic, our participants were going to need these services, so we broadened those and expanded those. We had COVID-specific policies that we enacted quickly, including a moratorium on penalties and sanctions. But we didn't stop working with our families. In fact, because non-compliance is so often tied to those barriers to participation, it was a unique opportunity to, without the threat of penalties and sanctions, to really dig deep with our participants and guide them towards resources. During this time, we also changed our intake process and we moved towards a prospective budgeting rather than retrospective, so that we weren't counting discontinued income against our new intakes and we could let more people on the program. And so during this time, we're constantly thinking, how are we going to move virtual without contributing to things like Zoom fatigue, without overwhelming our families, and with the known virtual challenges that they have. Next slide, please. So some of our engagement approaches, so honestly, during this time, our initial pandemic, the first 6 months or so, our sites were overwhelmed with intakes and processing payments and finding out how to get checks to our participants, following up with them. And so our sites were inundated. And so rather than immediately move digital, we had to really consider the above equity and access issues and get back to basics on our case management and communication approaches. So each site took it upon themselves to tailor communication specific to each, their area, their participants, the individual, and there was no one-size-fits-all approach. So we did case management primarily over the phone. We did case plans over the phone. We had daily and weekly check-ins. We did employ Zoom with some, but there are all these barriers, either the technology, an unfamiliarity with the technology, or a distrust of the technology. A lot of our participants lack the privacy in their home for virtual meetings, of course, Zoom fatigue. And we found that there was more openness to share issues over the phone, and our participants were actually divulging more than ever before, maybe because there wasn't that face-to-face interaction and they felt like they could. We also did home visits via video or through photos to meet safety needs in the home during this time. And then within all this electronic submission, we were still accepting paperwork through mail and Dropbox. And of course, the US mail system was very frustrating and overwhelmed during this time, so we had to navigate that. But our experience in rural areas really allowed us to get creative. We're used to working with participants with a lot of barriers to participation. And so we had to think about how to deliver programming and transition our families during this time. So again, our caseworkers really took this opportunity to encourage our participants to reflect, and the fact that many education programs were moved online, a lot of resources were moved virtually, and that a lot of our participants were on unemployment. A focus on education and training emerged, and they really told our participants, this is a time to gain new skills for whatever the landscape looks like, because no one knew at that time for employment. So we're really proud to say that while our work participation did take a hit, we saw gains in the areas of participants enrolling in college, GED, going back to school. So we're really proud of that. And we also had gains in communication. So again, constant communication. We had resources from all of our staff being pushed out, all hands, to our families. We went from sporadically communicating via email to our families to having it be the standard. So we started doing electronic newsletters and having communications that could flow really easily and timely to our families. As an agency, we had weekly meetings with all staff virtually, where our director would pass along important updates and directives, because things were changing almost daily at that time. And we also required daily check-ins for our supervisors. So some of our staff that was not able to work because of technology, their supervisors still kept in touch with them, kept them informed. And then it also allowed those debriefings on participant situations. And then during this time, because our sites were so inundated, our departments really stepped up with programs, content, and classes that were relevant and timely for our families. So our youth employment program was moved from in-person work experience to virtual education format. Because it was virtual, they were able to open it up to more youth than ever. So it was the biggest youth employment program we'd had in 2020 than before. And then our culture and wellness department also really came out quickly with virtual programming that was supportive to staff and participants. Next slide, please. So again, we were trying to make our workshops and trainings really relevant. We didn't want busy work. We wanted something that was going to help them at that time. So some of the virtual trainings that we implemented, and these were all collaborative, parenting workshops. So my region, I have 7 counties. And so we collaborated on a positive ending parenting workshop. And it was nice because no one person had to own it. We just signed up for slots for weeks to teach it. And it was really an easy way to deliver content to our participants without overwhelming any one person. We did substance use, 12 steps. Our culture and wellness did a wellness in the workplace every Wednesday for our staff, and participants could come as well. A lot of mental health and coping skills. Sanitation was something that we covered, general health, talking circles, And then, of course, cultural and education workshops were all done virtually via Zoom. What was nice is that workshops were available to all sites and staff, and we were no longer siloed or limited by distance, and we increased our collaboration. So if one site was doing a workshop, other sites could send participants. We also saw attendance and engagement increase in some areas because they could just join from their phone in their car or from their couch, and there wasn't any worry about transportation or scheduling. So some participants who never attended in person were now attending virtually. Some lessons we learned were to be mindful of workshop time. So we did a lot of morning workshops, and then we got feedback that, 10 a.m. isn't working for me. My kids are on Zoom, my internet's strained, and so afternoon would be better. So we started having afternoon and evening workshops to support those families. Pre-registration was another nice feature where we could anticipate attendance, send out reminders, and anticipate supply distribution. The number one barrier to virtual participation was, of course, access. So we incorporated call-in participation. So if we knew that they'd registered and there's internet issues, they were able to call in, and we provided printed materials ahead of time. We also provided study packets. So those without virtual access could still engage and receive credit for attending. And so we really allowed participants to participation to be asynchronous as well as live. We also did supply pickups and kits for our families via drive-through events and office pickups. And again, our staff really put themselves at risk to meet this need and make that happen. And then other agencies, so the virtual offerings of NA, AA, Native Wellness, telehealth, WIOA, they all put out virtual programming. And so we utilized our partners to supplement learning and educational opportunities. And it was a way to encourage participants to engage with these agencies when they might have been hesitant to in person. And then, of course, allowing our staff to engage with our partners. And at this time, we also continued with our virtual outreach with other agencies. And it almost made it easier to just get an invite to a staff meeting and do an all-staff presentation. So that was very helpful. And then for Tribal TANF agencies themselves, within our state coalition, California State Coalition, collaboration increased. So we had monthly meetings where we were discussing policy changes and guidance, sharing documents and policies, and more importantly, to debrief and share innovations amongst our agencies. Next slide, please. So looking forward, we see a lot of room for virtual opportunities even after COVID restrictions. I can't believe that we didn't use Zoom or virtual workshops prior to COVID because we are so large. It just kind of makes sense when you think about it. And then those traditional roadblocks to attendance and participation can be reduced with virtual. There's no more, oh, I can't get a ride, or don't have childcare. People can just join from their phones. There's also an opportunity with modified curriculum like asynchronous or having it where they could just learn on demand. And there's no reason why we can't continue virtual even when we return to in-person and just offer them both at the same time. So we want to keep and expand our offerings. We want to continue that cross-collaboration. It broadens what we can do, avoid staff burnout, and we want to expand our youth offerings virtually because our youth are already ready to go virtually. They have that technology, they have those skills, and so we're really expanding what we offer to our youth as well. We're also implementing a device laptop loan policy and program. And we want to keep that flexibility in accessing services and how we accept documents. We really want to move towards paperless. We've had a lot of issues with fires in our areas, and so it just makes sense to move to a scanning paperless system. It makes approvals easier. It was mentioned several times yesterday that only 25% of eligible families for TANF are receiving it, and so I think making an application process as low barrier as possible is something that can help with that. Also, we used to require someone, if they had a case plan update, they needed to come into our office. And so allowing those to be done over the phone or virtually and preventing them from having to come in, especially if they're working their plan and they're busy. And then we really love the availability of learning for staff. So staff maybe we were only able to send 2 or 3 people because of the hotel and travel costs. We were able to send large groups of people to UC Davis institutes and other trainings. So it really was cost effective and time effective. And then in-house, we used to wait until we had a group of new staff to do our caseworker training and our database training. And now it's done within the first month, if not within the first couple of weeks. It's moved virtually. And so we know that having those trainings early on sets those staff up for success and ultimately helps our families. And so that's how we've changed our training style, is everything's done virtually now. We're also excited about the increase in online GED in college to enhance employability, especially for our rural areas where we had participants who had to travel an hour or two one way to go to college or to attend a training program. And so we're really excited about those offerings, and I hope that's something that stays. And then, of course, with an agency as large as ours, consistency is always a goal. And so virtual offerings will allow us to provide the same level of services in a cost-effective way across all of our service areas, utilizing our departments to their fullest, and ultimately improving the ability for our families to engage in different ways. That's all I have. Thank you. Oh, next slide, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. That was an amazing presentation. And I really love how you detailed how y'all were able to switch back into this more electronic format so quickly in the lessons that you learned along the way. Up next to talk about virtual training, we have Cassie Williams from the Choctaw Nation Summer Employment Program. Cassie?
Hello. I hope everybody's doing good this afternoon. I am Cassie Williams. I'm the Assistant Director for the Employment Training Services for the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. And I actually just moved into this position a few months ago. Prior to that, I was the Summer Youth Counselor Coordinator for our program. Next slide. So I wanted to talk to you guys about our summer youth training and how that, I want to first go over what it looked like before COVID and what it looked like after. And we've actually done a virtual program 2 years in a row, and I'll explain more about that in a moment. But our program started in the late 1970s. At first, we only serviced approximately 2 to 250 summer youth participants. And the ages were anywhere, was about 14 to 21 years of age. We do service all Native American youth that reside within the Choctaw boundaries. And at first, we only allowed participants to work at nonprofit businesses. Next slide. So over the years, we've actually, in the late 1990s, the tribe wanted to be able to service more students and really develop their programs. So they added a supplemental program and gave us additional tribal funding. And now we steadily reach close to 1,000 participants, if not more. This year, we actually had 1,107 tribal youth that completed our program. And due to child labor laws, we did scale the age to 16 to 21 just because it's so difficult to place 14 and 15-year-olds in the field. We again still service all Native American youth that reside within our boundaries, but we've changed it to where we can now place them at any and all businesses. And so that has allowed us to build a lot of rapport with those businesses, even in our adult programs. And we have a lot of people say, how do you recruit businesses to allow you to let the summer youth work at their place and the adults? And we don't have to. We do go and visit. We make phone calls. But we've built such a rapport with them over the years in all the different areas and the counties that they call us, and we have a list of businesses. And so when we find a student that they want to be a baker when they grow up or when they finish high school, then we just look at our list and say, the baker over in your area is actually wanting some help. So it's really awesome that we've been able to build that rapport with them. Next slide. So our summer youth program, in a typical year, we actually put the children to work at a business. And our first step is to recruit them. We usually use newspaper posts. We mail out postcards. We use all media that we can, such as our Choctaw Nation website and social media. One of our biggest is we actually have built a rapport with all of our schools. And so the schools actually allow us to go in and set up a time to meet with all the students that are Native American and assist them with applying for our program. So we have an online application and you can apply from anywhere, but that just helps them, walks them through the process, and parents, can come up there and submit the documents. And so that's one of the things that we've done for years. And that's always been great. And then every year we actually hire 15 summer youth counselors because there's no way a staff of 8 could do 1,100 kids. So we have about 15 summer youth counselors. It does vary from year to year about how many that we're going to temporarily employ during the summer. But this year it was 15, and the previous year it was 15 as well. And just assist us with contracts. They communicate with the youth. They do site visits. They get their timesheets. And we typically find summer youth counselors that are teachers at schools. They're school counselors. They're coaches. They're people that are very well known in the community. So they know people. They know the businesses. They know the families. They know the students. And so we just hire them temporarily during the summer to help us. And then they all come back every year. They love the program. A lot of them have either worked on the program as a youth, or all of their kids did, and grandkids. So that's a really useful tool. If you want to go big and you want to add large numbers to your training, that's one way that you can help bring aboard extra hands. Again, we do an application that's online, and then we process each and every summer youth through our HR human resource department. We want them to get the full experience of working in a normal job. So they come in, they do a drug screening, they do a background check, they sign onboarding, new hire paperwork, they set up their direct deposit, or we issue them a pay card, then they attend an orientation. So it's just very much, we want them to see what it just looks like to just have a job and work normally. And then once all of that's completed, we start our job shadowing. So they go to work at the business for about 5 weeks during the summer, and they work 40 hours a week. And there they receive training and mentoring. Some of the stories that I could tell you is I have a cousin that completed the program. She didn't know what she wanted to do in high school. And through her training and mentoring, she ended up getting her CNA license at the local nursing home. She went on to get an LPN license, and she still works there in the administrative office. So that's just one success story out of a lot of success stories that I know. So they get not just training, but that mentoring. So they get to meet people in that field, in that profession. They're going to encourage them. They're going to give them advice on the next steps that they need to take. So that's what the whole program is about. Next slide. So moving forward, what does that look like for when you're facing a pandemic? So again, like I said, we actually have done a virtual job shadow program for 2 years now with Choctaw Nation. We start taking applications on January 1st. And so we had to make that decision early on if we were going to allow the students to work in the field or not. The first year, we kept the recruitment very much the same. Most of the site visits to the schools and things of that nature had already taken place. And then we all went into quarantine late March. But the second year, it was very limited. So we did newspaper outreach. We sent out postcards to all of them. We did mass emails. So we got with our other departments here at Choctaw Nation, other educational departments requested that they send out emails to all of their students. We got with our career development, asked if they'd send that to all of their college students. We did online virtual career fairs. I attended all of the local colleges and spoke about our program. We did do some WebEx, Zoom, or Teams meetings with any of the schools. Choctaw Nation set us up with those programs probably 3 or 4 years ago. We've had pretty much all of those capabilities. And so we would just reach out to the school and figure out which one that they preferred. And then we would set up a meeting. Some of the schools are very closed down. So we put together paper packets and delivered those to school counselors, just anything that we could do to get the word out there and to reach the students. We also did employ 15 summer youth counselors. What they did is they helped us gather any documents. We did a lot of mail documents. So we would mail out a document with a pre-stamped envelope. We'd call the student, tell them it was coming. We would call, email, I even Facebook some people, just anything that we could use to get their attention. And we had the summer youth counselors gather reports every week on the students' progress. They graded assignments. We didn't really require a grade on our virtual job shadowing, but we did require at least that they made attempts and basically that they wouldn't just type whatever. So the summer youth counselors would go in and they would look at that and make sure that they were actually doing the work. Now, one of the problems that we faced was we have students who don't have internet or they have spotty internet. Some students don't have access to computers, they don't have laptops. And with the pandemic, virtually everything was shut down. One of the things that we didn't want to do is leave them behind. So we developed a workbook for each student, and we sent out a questionnaire to each student asking if they had reliable internet. We asked them if they had the equipment necessary to complete the program. We did inform them that phones were not very compatible, and it was preferred that they had a laptop or a computer. And by doing that, we were able to allow every single youth that wanted to participate, they were able to participate. And we didn't do drop-offs, we did mail out. So we mailed a workbook to each student that wanted to complete the program via workbook, and we included a self-stamped envelope to mail it back. And so that's how we processed that the first year. And the second year, things relaxed a little bit, and so they were able to do drop-offs to their summer youth counselors. We still did some mail out. We just asked the student what they preferred, what they felt comfortable with, and then we just adjusted to that. Again, we did online applications. We've been in the process of mailing paperwork, emailing, doing electronic signatures and things like that for a long time. So that process really wasn't too bad. But during the pandemic, we were not able to bring our students in to do an HR process, and they actually didn't get in on that experience. But we still had to find a way to pay our summer youth students. Normally, that's part of the HR process. They set up that direct deposit or a pay card. And so we couldn't do that. So what we did is we set each one of them up as a vendor in our system, and we collected W-9 forms. And we were able to complete that process. Now, the second year, we actually had to go with, I think we had a power outage. The second year, we actually decided we wanted to go with a third-party vendor And that gave some a local business some assistance through our program as well. And they actually wrote and cut the checks for the student. And the reason why we did it the different way the second year is because when we set the students up with a W-9 payment through our financial system, they were actually subject to pay taxes on that. And so the second year, because of the pandemic, we really wanted the students to get all of their money. So we set it up as an educational training payment and was able to get them the full amount, and they weren't required to pay any tax on that. And then we completed a virtual orientation for each student. Those were just included in their lessons. They completed 5 weeks worth of work, 2 daily lessons. So the first year we did a virtual job shadowing, and the second year we did a financial literacy piece. The financial literacy piece, the reason why we brought that on the second year is leadership is actually thinking about bringing that on for the entire Choctaw Nation. So when someone comes up and gets assistance, we also want to try to get them some education. And there's things about things within that financial literacy that I learned that I didn't know. So I completed the program as well. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slides. But next slide. So in the virtual training, some of the topics that we actually put out there was goal planning, career finance, interview questions. They did career exploration. So they watched different people in different fields, electricians, zoologists, chocolatiers. There was just all kinds of careers that they could watch. We did set so many lessons that they had to watch, but then there was additional lessons that they could watch if they wanted to. We also did soft skills. And then on financials, they had to take things over budgeting, balancing a checkbook, savings, budgeting, contracts, compound interest, taxes, how to build credits. There was just a lot of things that they covered. Again, it was about 60 lessons total. And they really, really enjoyed it. Go ahead and go to the next slide. These are some of the success stories. Some of the summer youth participants, actually quite a bit, they would write back and let us know what they thought of the program. We did a survey to assess how well they liked it, and it was an overwhelmingly positive response. Of course, they missed the regular program, but just in light of that, they were very appreciative of having this opportunity. And we didn't want to not do the program. We wanted to give them as much hope, and I mean, it was just a hard time. It was just a hard time for a lot of them. And this first letter, it really, if you read it, you find out that, you know, she's had to deal with a lot in her life. And so there was a lot taken away from the kids. A lot of them didn't get to go to more graduation. And so we didn't want to take this program away from them. So that's the way that we were able to mitigate that. And we were also able to refer them over to other programs, especially COVID programs during the time, and that's something that we did. I will say going forward, some of the things that we are going to work on is we'll look at every situation case by case. We did have some youth that fell behind, and we had to let them submit lessons late due to hardships that they were facing. So if you ever do a virtual program, keep that in mind for your students. One of the other things that I would say is include a workbook option for your students and allow everyone to participate. One of the things that we really didn't address, and it's something we will address going forward, is students with disabilities. Some students have IEPs, and we didn't really develop a program that was tailored for them. So if we ever do this program again, or we do the financial literacy piece going forward, that is something that we will definitely make sure that they have an opportunity to complete lessons that are tailored to them. And there have been talks with Choctaw Nation that we are going to possibly bring back the 14 and 15-year-olds and let them do a virtual job shadow. Again, it's sometimes hard to place them in a work setting due to child labor laws, but them completing a virtual job shadowing would be great. And it would get them in the mindset of looking at, future colleges, future careers, get them financial training. I just know so many people that if they had had more financial information, they might not have made the mistakes that they made, and I'm one of them. Next slide. So here's just a breakdown of, over the years, some of our numbers. Again, in 2021, we hit 1,107. We're hoping that we increase that by about 50 to 100 every single year. It's been a great turnout, and we're very proud of our program. And we're proud that we were able to offer training and education despite everything that's happened. I feel like a lot of things that we were doing in our program, we had already established a lot of no contact ways of getting documents. So it was very easy for us to transition. Next slide. And that's pretty much everything that I have, and I hope that you guys enjoyed. And if you have any questions for me later on at the end, please write those down, and I'm free to answer them.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Cassie. That was wonderful. And I really appreciate how you were able to move forward and recreate your program during this very difficult time and create opportunities for the kids to do virtual job shadows and whatnot. I'm sure it meant a lot. I know that when I was a kid, having a job was a big part of my growing process.
Absolutely.
Yes, definitely a big part. Up next, to talk about virtual coaching, we have Deb Joff, who's the Associate Manager with PCG. And Deb, when you come on, if you want to tell us when you want to launch your poll, that would be great.
Will do. Thanks so much. I'm excited to be here with you all to talk about a valuable resource that OFA has funded that is available for use as of this spring. So next slide. Actually, we'll skip the agenda because I want to just launch right into it. So before we begin, I am going to have you launch the poll and just find out how many folks on this call know what coaching is and have used coaching in your programs. Are you using coaching in any form? We be seeing the results, or I'm seeing a black box?
Oh, sorry, that's not very helpful, is it? So yes, we have 55% and no at 45%.
Awesome. Great. So I may be preaching to the choir, as they say here, if you guys are most of you are already using coaching in some form, but I want to just explain the Coaching for Success e-learning that is available for free to all TANF and Tribal TANF and new agencies on the OFA's learning site. So this journey began back in 2017 when OFA reviewed a number of different coaching strategies that were available and ended up partnering with us to take our human services coaching framework, which we had previously created for in-person training, and we worked with OFA to convert the in-person training to an online e-learning curriculum that can be done in a self-paced manner. It was designed, developed, and tested, the framework with 400 or more. I think we're at about 750 TANF coaching professionals or TANF case managers, and we worked with many agencies around the country to vet the curriculum as well. I actually recognize a couple of names. I think some of you may have been part of some of our listening sessions or script reviewers several years ago. So this is that same curriculum coming to fruition. On the next slide, I just want to level set what I'm talking about when I talk about coaching, because it is important. The word gets used a lot in lots of different configurations. And so on the next slide, we present the definition of coaching that we use in this e-learning curriculum. Coaching is a person-centered, strengths-based way of working with others that helps them direct the changes they want to make in their own life. And we have this framework, which is 3 pillars: person-centered, relationship-based, and goal-driven, that helps create a framework and a mindset to help case managers infuse coaching into the work that they do. And when I do the training in person or virtually, I always pause on the definition of coaching and ask for what the most important word is in this definition of coaching. And people always, it's one sentence. It's very compact. Tried to put a lot of content into one sentence. And people always point to person-centered. That really jumps out at a lot of people. But I always say that the most important 3 words in this definition is them, they, and their. Because coaching is about what the person being coached wants to achieve, not what the TANF agency or the new agency wants the person to achieve, right? It's about putting the person in the driver's seat of their own life and helping them set their own goals and working toward those goals using coaching as the basis of that relationship. So on the next slide, the e-learning curriculum presents coaching as a case management tool. It is proven to be an effective way to engage and build rapport with participants in programs. Coaching promotes independence, builds problem-solving skills, and helps participants realize their own strengths. So for a lot of TANF, Tribal TANF, and new participants, when they are asked what they want to do, they may not always know what they want to do. They may not know where their strengths lie and where they should focus their attention in terms of education and employment. And coaching, by using powerful questions and letting the person reflect on their own experience and their lived experiences and what they have been able to succeed in life, coaches can help bring that out in people, identify their own strengths, and then use that as the motivation to build toward a future goal. And one thing that's important to note is that coaching techniques can really be useful throughout the whole case management process, whether you're getting to know someone at intake and assessment, whether you're working with them on developing their employment plan or their educational goals, or whether you're working with them on an ongoing basis. And actually, it was great to hear some of the earlier presenters talk about keeping in touch with people. And that really is the basis of the work that we do as case managers, right, is that relationship. And in a virtual setting, it's even more important to be able to apply those concepts. Next slide. So the coaching framework training that PCG had originally developed was 12 to 16 hours of in-person training, and we converted it to e-learning, self-paced modules, so that your case managers can do it from the comfort of their own desks and at their own pace. On the next slide, the whole series is called Coaching for Success, and it's 15 total modules. Each should take about half an hour to 45 minutes. Follows the 3 pillars of the framework that I showed before: person-centered, relationship-based, and goal-driven. We worked with OFA to develop a user guide with instructions for accessing the modules, lists out the definitions of some of the key terms used, and gives a summary of all of the modules so that you know what content is contained in each of the modules. And this is a great website to always earmark. It's the PeerTA, OFA PeerTA Online Learning Center, and that's where OFA publishes a lot of training and great webinars and events. It's also where you can find all 15 modules of the Coaching for Success training. And I'll come back around to show you how to access it at the end. The next slide. Within the person-centered module, we start out with kind of an overview of the whole Coaching for Success curriculum, and then an introduction to what coaching is, and a real clear focus on using a person-centered approach. In this module, we address the tendency for case managers to really want to help the client in ways that may end up hurting the customer's self-confidence or reduce their own ability to problem solve for themselves. We really want to use a person-centered mindset to build up the person's skills so that they can continue to succeed even after they've left our program. On the next slide, there are 6 modules in the relationship-based pillar, and we start with emotional intelligence because it's really important for a case manager to understand themselves and how they interact with other people before they can become a really good, effective coach for somebody else. So emotional intelligence is more about the case manager learning about who they are and how they react in certain situations so that they can then apply that to the work that they do. In some of the other sessions, we'll actually see a demo of the active listening in a little bit. Module 5 on reflective statements is a really important tool for developing case manager and client relationships. A reflective statement, for example, is designed to show the client that you're listening and fully engaged in a conversation without interrupting or adding your own judgment. And it's a really useful tool. Sometimes case managers or supervisors or just humans in general tend to want to ask questions and continue the follow-up. But often for an effective coaching relationship, you just want to sit back and listen and let the person self-discover on their own. So the relationship-based module helps build some really critical hard skills. I think of them as the hard skills in a world of soft skills, because it's how are you actually going to use a summary statement to make the person sitting across from you think about what they just said and understand whether what they said is what they really meant. How are you going to ask a powerful question so that they can have some self-discovery and self-learning while still answering your question and moving the process forward. And then the final pillar is goal-driven on the next slide. And there are 4 modules that focus on setting goals, supporting the skill development in a goal-setting manner, and building strength through setbacks. All 4 of these work together to help a case manager be a really effective goal-setting coach. Goals are at the core of what the TANF and the new program do, the Tribal TANF and the new program do, and the state TANF programs as well. Your goal is to help somebody set a goal and work toward it to the ultimate goal of self-sufficiency. But we can't use the big goal of self-sufficiency as the only goal that the family might be working toward. So what the e-learning does is it helps break down goal setting into smaller pieces and use some really clear goal setting techniques that are proven by research to help improve the possible outcomes for the participant themselves. The other thing I just want to mention is that all of these things are things that even if you answered no, that you're not using coaching, they're skills that case managers are already using. One of the main goals of the e-learning curriculum is to bring awareness and intentionality to the best practices that we've always known are really helpful case management techniques, and to really try and establish that coaching mindset so that case managers are intentional about how they're working with their participants and their customers. On the next slide, the last 2 modules of the series try and round it out, right? The module 13 focuses on a key aspect of coaching. A lot of case managers, when I do this training around the country, I find that they really enjoy and like giving advice to their customers. And while giving advice has a place in case management, it's not coaching. And so we spend module 13 talking about the difference between coaching versus offering solutions and what the appropriate situation is to do each. There are certain times if someone's in crisis or just needs a quick answer, that's exactly what the case manager should do. And there are other times, like during those goal-setting conversations, where the case manager should sit back and really let the person discover for themselves rather than giving advice. And Module 14 closes out the series by explaining the benefits of coaching in case management and addressing how and when to apply these coaching skills and tools for the best possible outcome for your customers. So that was a quick overview of the 15 modules. I think we have a few minutes, so I'm going to share a short demo of the active listening module. This was back in the relationship-based framework, and we'll watch for a few minutes. I may cut the demo a little bit short to make sure we have time for questions at the end, but go ahead.
Active listening requires us to create conditions that allow us to give our undivided attention to the client. We must be completely attentive and tuned into them. In order to do this, one of the first things we need to do is to remove all distractions. Take a moment to think about the things that distract you. Write them down or look around your work environment to identify common distractors. Once you've made a list, click Next to see some common office distractions. You've probably considered external distractions such as cell phones or office phones, office noises such as conversations between coworkers and their clients or clients' children, emails, music. Have you also considered internal distractions? What about personal, emotional, or mental distractions that occupy space in your mind and sometimes your heart? Internal distractions can also include items you need to add to your grocery list, mentally planning your weekend, or even thinking about what you're going to have for lunch. Remember, in Module 3, we talked about emotional intelligence and how our emotions not only impact us, but also those around us. While it may be best to completely disconnect from these emotional impacts, doing so can be challenging. Regardless of the external or internal distractions, we should make every effort to do whatever is in our control to create an environment that shows the other person that they have our total attention. Let's look at some ways we can create this type of environment. There are 7 items in the picture that could be distractors. Select each item for more information on how they can impact your work. Yes, clock watching can be a distractor. Be tuned in and aware as you engage with clients.
Okay, we can
You should
stop
be
it.
mindful of keeping appointment
We can
times.
stop it
Don't
there.
allow yourself to get...
So the activity goes on to have the participant or the learner select the different distractors, the different things that might be taking away from their attention that they're giving to their customers. And that's the kind of interaction that you'll find throughout all of the modules. We also incorporate some videos and some examples of coaching in practice that help illustrate really what good coaching can look like and how it might compare to a more typical transactional case management interaction. You also saw in that video the framework. So you can see on the left-hand side, there's kind of a navigation pane to skip around in the session. We also were showing it in the accessible form with closed captioning turned on. So every module has a progress bar at the bottom to show you how far you have left in that particular module, and it has the closed captioning. There are also 508 compliant scripts available for download as well. Some of the modules also have some downloadable resources that people can download to their computer and print out to help reinforce some of the learning. I wanted to take a quick minute to just talk about how one state is implementing the curriculum, and that is the Wyoming Department of Workforce Services. So on the next slide, we have partnered with Wyoming to do a mixed method approach. The director of the POWER program, the TANF program out in Wyoming, knew for a long time she wanted to use this e-learning curriculum, and so she created a plan for the case managers to complete the e-learning modules on their own. They were assigned over the course of a 3-month period. They were each assigned 1 to 2 modules per week. to complete. Like I said, they're only about half an hour each, and that was done independently. And then once a month, she got all of the Power case managers together from around the state in a virtual environment. We used Microsoft Teams to have a 90-minute session where we reviewed the material that they had just completed in the previous month in the e-learning and had an opportunity to discuss the content and share some experiences. It was also a chance to encourage the case managers to really put the skills into practice right away and to do some reflecting and action planning for themselves and setting some goals for how they're going to use coaching in their own work. And I'm actually talking to you from in the world of COVID, one of my very first trips to do an in-person training, maybe my last for a while. I'm actually going to be in Wyoming tomorrow to do an in-person 4-hour session to bring it all together so that they have the opportunity to really practice some of those skills that they've been learning over the last 3 months on the computer and bring them into real life. We'll be practicing the techniques and using some of their tools, real life tools and forms that they use in the TANF program. So they'll be practicing with their IRPs, their individual responsibility plans, and how to use coaching in those conversations. So that's one way that Wyoming was able to leverage the e-learning, and they decided to wrap around it some in-person and virtual training so that people, while doing the e-learning on their own, would still have some touch points with their peers to be able to enhance that learning. On the next slide, actually, we're going to talk about accessing the curriculum, so you can go straight to the next slide after that. On the OFA's Peer TA Online Learning Center, this is how you access all of the curriculums. They're all on the Peer TA Learning Management System. So the learners register for the website. I do believe that two-factor authentication may have gone live this summer. So they may have to do some they have to set up a username and password to be able to access the site. That way they can come back and it records how many of the modules they've completed. And then on the next slide, so when you click on the module, it brings up a window like the one you saw in the demo. And also on the OFA Peer TA Learning Center is the user guide. And the user guide includes a brief introduction to coaching, the step-by-step guide to accessing the courses, summaries of all 15 of the modules, and some key definitions. So this is a really important tool to make sure that people understand what they're going to be learning and also how to access the information. And I believe that is it for me. So that is available. It is free. The e-learnings themselves are free of charge and available for all TANF, Tribal TANF, and new agencies to use.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that wonderful overview of the OFA tool. And I'm sure it'll be in the materials, but if anyone ever needs to find it, you can literally just Google OFA Peer TA and you can get right to the resources that are there and get signed up to use everything. We are going to open things up for questions now. So preferred method would be if you were to put your question in the chat box. You can also use at the bottom of your screen, there's these reactions, and you can do one that's called the raise hand. If you raise your hand, it will show up on the participant list, and then I can unmute you and open up for your question. So either way that works, we'd love to get some questions. And Cassie and Lisa, if you want to, I don't know, bring up your cameras again, maybe, just in case. In the interim, while we're waiting to see if any questions come up, if there was one thing that you wanted someone to bring from your presentation today, you want to share what that might be? Any of the other presenters?
I'll go first. I just think that it's a really valuable resource that OFA invested in to create an online learning that is available for free to your agencies. And the other thing I realized I didn't say, if I might just add, is that coaching can be done in a virtual environment. especially for those of you who may, like Lisa's department, be using video conferencing, it's a really great way. You can coach over a video call very easily. You can also coach over the phone. Coaching doesn't have to be, a long sit-down in-person session. So I think that's a really important takeaway, is that the skills that are taught in this training can be used in any kind of interaction, in person, over the phone, heck, even over text. You could use some coaching techniques and ask questions and work with your customers to commit to when and where and how they're going to do certain things. And that's a clear coaching technique, and that could be done over text as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. So we have a question for Cassie, and then maybe we'll see if we have any other takeaways from you guys after this question's done. Cassie, what does virtual job shadowing entail?
I'm sorry, you were kind of cutting out. What was that?
The question is, what does virtual job shadowing entail?
So we actually set the students up with a virtual job shadowing program, and it's literally called Virtual Job Shadow. And we actually licensed that from that company. And they have hundreds of lessons that you can choose from, so you can set up your own curriculum. And we actually just picked the best ones for our students. Of course, the students can look at any of the lessons or programs or the job shadowing that was on that website, but we did specify so many that they needed to look at. And then for our financial literacy, we actually contracted with the St. Louis Federal Reserve Bank, and we offered a program called Econ Lowdown. The Econ Lowdown program was completely free for us to use. Again, Choctaw Nation is working with developing that for a lot of other programs, just to get financial literacy out to all of our tribal members. We worked with Econ Lowdown, the Federal Reserve Bank. We set up a syllabus for what lessons that we wanted the students to take. So they completed lessons regarding the financial literacy, like credit card use and student loans and budgeting. And then going back to the virtual job shadow, they completed things like looking at various colleges. They submitted resumes, like mock, resumes. They created cover letters. They did mock college applications. There's just a variety of things. And they also, of course, did like virtual job shadowing. So they watched various people in different industries to see if that, just to see what it required for them to get that. A lot of other things that we added in this year, because we did it for 2 years. So on the second year, we wanted to add more job skills. And so we brought in things like diversity in the workforce, just lessons like that, lessons concerning maybe harassment in the workplace, and just things like that. We wanted them to go a little bit more. I hope that answers the question.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Lisa, we have a question for you. What sort of supports did you offer your staff during the pandemic?
So for our staff, there was the ability to work from home or work in the office depending on their situation. So some staff, actually, it was better for them to work in the office because of home distractions. So we allowed that. We also had our HR department heavily pushed our employee assistance program. And then again, our culture and wellness department very quickly implemented curriculum for wellness in the workplace. And so it was a chance once a week for an hour for all of our staff to come together and just kind of debrief and get some wellness. And so I think that really helped staff. And then we had all hands meetings. So all 90 of us would get on a meeting, and staff really enjoyed that as well. It was a way to not feel isolated and connect. And so those are ways that we supported staff during that time, and a lot of supervisor support during this time as well.
Wonderful. So just a quick reminder to everyone, there is an evaluation survey, so please click on that before you go. But I wanted to see if either Lisa or Cassie had a takeaway that you would like folks to have from what you talked about today before we...
I actually have one, and it's from mine and also from what Cassie spoke about. is just the need for flexibility. So to make sure that no one's left behind, we were very flexible. I'm sorry, Kathy, if I took your takeaway, but but we were very flexible, and we knew that not everyone could get on Zoom and participate. And so just having different ways for people to engage. And I love that she said they did a workbook and a survey. And we did some technology surveys as well, because not everyone still at this time, a year and a half later, not everyone is able to get on Zoom or have that capability. And so I think just flexibility and being willing to be flexible with your program's policies, which I know has to go through proper channels, but that was really important for us to make those changes swiftly.
Fantastic. Cassie, did you have one?
Mine was basically the same, just being very flexible and just evaluating everything case by case. Again, back to what Lisa said, we all have policies that we have to adhere to, but don't be afraid to take things to leadership, your leadership, things that you see that might be useful tools, reaching out to other departments or other agencies. That's something that we learned, like when we did our mass emails, we reached out to other departments. We actually learned of the virtual job shadow program through another department here at Choctaw Nation. So being willing to collaborate and just being very flexible would be my takeaway.
Wonderful. Thank you. I am not seeing any more questions on the chat screen or any hands up at the moment. If anyone has a question they'd want to ask and they want to unmute, please do so. Otherwise, we have about 4 minutes left. So if you would, please do the SurveyMonkey survey evaluation. And that would be fantastic. And thank you all for participating. Thank you to our wonderful speakers. You guys were fantastic. I learned a lot, I know, and it was wonderful, especially to hear just the amazing things that y'all were doing out in your communities and about the new training program and whatnot. And if you open up your chat, there's a few thank yous showing up for you too as well from the participants. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and include my information in case anybody wants to email me something directly, okay?
Wonderful. Thank you. You can put that in the chat and everyone will be able to see it. Oh, and we have Deb Jobs information is there as well. Cassie's. Wonderful. I know Lisa's is also at the end of her slides, so have that available to you. And if you pan up in the chat, the SurveyMonkey link is there to do the session evaluation. And it's really short, like 6 really super short questions. Let's see, we got a new message. Oh, there it is again. Showed up again. That would be the SurveyMonkey link. Okay. I think that's it, everybody. Thank you so much. Y'all did a wonderful job. It was fantastic.